So our first speaker to kick off the day is Karuna Scheinfeld from Woolrich. So Karuna is the VP of Design at Woolrich, and we brought her on to really talk about, product that stands the test of time, and she will take you through what that means. So, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I love everything you just said. Hi, everybody. See if I can get this right. Okay. Happy Cinco de Mayo. My dad has a uniform he's been wearing for the past 20 years. When he was younger, he was more experimental. Like when my parents got married, he wore a purple suede cowboy suit. Now, though, he only wears a blue Oxford shirt, gray flat front Brooks Brothers wool trousers, black socks, and a white undershirt. So if we go canoeing, that's what he's wearing. If we go to a business meeting, that's what he's wearing. If we went to a wedding, that's what he'd be wearing. If he goes to the beach, that's what he's wearing, but with swim trunks instead of pants. It's become endearing. My family teases him, this short Jewish man in his uniform. Around 2003, I was helping him organize his closet. In its depths, I came upon one of his 40 or so Oxford shirts. It was from the 80s and had that classic preppy look that I was into. A more slender cut, a softer fabric. It fit me well. Most significantly, it had his initials, DRS, monogrammed onto the pocket, which I was immediately drawn to. It was that monogram that actually turned him off from wearing it and got the shirt relegated to the back of his closet. My father's brother, Jim, had given him the shirt, thinking the monogram was a nice detail, but to my father, it represented the man. My father's father was a businessman, and his brother was a businessman, and he had rejected that path to become an anthropologist. As his daughter, though, I loved the idea of wearing a shirt with his initials on it. He gave it to me, and I started wearing it all the time, to the point that I got a little bit psycho about it. I was wearing the shirt every week. I would bring it to work to show them how I wanted the shirts that we were making to feel, to fit, but I would never let them keep it. I started acting really paranoid. I traveled a lot for work back then, and I would wear it on every trip, but I wouldn't put it in my checked luggage. I would wear it onto the airplane to China, Peru, India. I knew I was being ridiculous, but then my luggage got stolen, and it confirmed that I had done the right thing. There was no way not to wear it on every single flight. Who knew what could happen? Even though my father's healthy, he's 81 and has entered into old age, so his death is in my mind. During my 4 years living in Italy, so far apart from my parents in Chicago, that kind of anxiety gave the shirt more weight. Over time, I wore the Oxford so much that it began to fall apart, to fray, to tear. I'd repair it, but then when one of the sleeves ripped off, it reached a point where I felt like I couldn't wear it anymore. I had a friend named Guy who was a painter in Tel Aviv. He'd been doing a series of paintings of everyday objects, so I commissioned him to make a painting of the shirt. I wanted it to act as a memorial. I just couldn't let it go. When he was working on it, I'd get emails like, "Karuna, this shirt, it's killing me. It's so simple and yet so complicated." He's appropriately dramatic. He wound up making 2 paintings of it. Both are abstract, distilling the shirt to its essential elements, but each is slightly different. He gave me one, I bought the other. I didn't like the idea of anyone owning them but me. Now one hangs in my office and the other in my bedroom. That story is an excerpt from a book called Worn Stories by Emily Spivak, published in 2014, that I had the fortune to contribute to. She's been writing the Worn Stories blog for the past 6 years, interviewing hundreds of people, famous and obscure, about their favorite, most meaningful pieces of clothing. In writing this book, Ms. Spivak has touched on a current underlying the work that you and I do every day. These items that people use become more than objects, more than products. These pieces of clothing become meaning in each one of these people's lives, as they have in my own. Your program today might say, Designing Product That Stands the Test of Time, but actually the real title for this talk is Designing Product That Lasts a Long Time and People Value to Create Meaning and Reduce Waste. That was just a little bit long for the program. This is what I'm here to talk to you about and to explain. I don't assume that everyone wants to do what I want to do, or wants to design the type of product that I want to design. But I'm guessing that if you're in the audience today, you're curious about what this means, and you're attracted to this idea. I learned early on in my career what kind of designer I was. More interested in sewing machines than fashion magazines. I preferred learning to knit and weave to working backstage at the runway shows. I was an apparel designer, a product designer, a clothing designer, more than a fashion designer or an image designer. I wanted to make objects to offer to real people to use and connect with, rather than creating something to help them escape themselves. That's not to say I look at fashion and fantasy with any disdain. I think it can be beautiful, amazing, and even really important. It's just not what I do. I make objects that work, that function, and that last. I had a variety of internships that turned into jobs, getting experience with a wide range of brands: Old Navy, Alexander McQueen, American Eagle, Dolce & Gabbana, from high to low and to the middle, Abercrombie & Fitch, Ralph Lauren. I discovered that I loved working with well-made, high-quality product, but cared more about my favorite, well-worn, and long-lasting clothes than I did about anything related to status or glamour. I was born on a farm, raised in a city, and I'm the child of intellectuals that love the outdoors. I wanted to design product that met my exacting standards, but that my family could wear and that my family could afford. As I continued to design more product and gave it or sold it to people I cared about, the more personal it all became. I moved to Italy to head up men's design for Woolrich, John Rich & Brothers. I got to experience working with and speaking with the press. My work was featured in blogs and magazines that I loved. However, I quickly realized that none of that acclaim was as satisfying to me as someone telling me that they still wear the jacket, sweater, or shirt that I designed 10 years ago that they purchased. Hearing that one of the objects I designed was someone's favorite thing, which they wore all the time, that they wish they could buy another one, this became the highest compliment for me. We all experience and recognize the power that objects can hold. We build an emotional attachment to them. My favorite cozy sweater, a dependency, the parka that I can't live without. Pride. I've been wearing the shirt for 12 years and it still looks like new. Some have a legacy. This was my grandmother's dress, my grandfather's pack. There's a kind of magic that clothing can bring into our lives. A layer upon simple form or function that actually increases joy, intensity, and feeling. If there's one thing that as designers we all intuitively know, it's that human beings can become extremely emotionally attached to objects. I suspect that's why most of us chose this field of work. Not only because of our emotional reaction to product, be it loving it or hating it, but the meaning that these objects hold in our lives. Product is capable of creating meaning, and that's the type of product that I want to design. So, how do you go about purposefully creating product that through its design creates more meaning in a person's life? It's a complicated question. Intuitively, I know this is possible, but I don't know whether you can actually articulate, share, and teach how to achieve it. This is the part of the speech where I admit that I don't have all the answers. Michelle and Sam, I hope that's okay. I've been thinking about it for a while now while designing thousands of pieces of clothing through my career. I don't believe that there is or ever will be a simple formula. Instead, what I'm developing is a method, an inquiry, a practice. That's what I'm here to share with you today. What I'm hoping is that you'll share back, and this method will continue to take shape. I first began thinking about designing product for long-term use and the effect of investing in garments for the long term when a friend and I started a small line of functional luxury menswear more than a decade ago. Martin Wynn existed for only 3 seasons. The whole concept started because of a pair of performance socks, a perfect blend of function, aesthetic, and material. We wanted to create product that used new materials in classic forms. We worked on it for a few years, landed some great accounts, created some innovative product, and eventually gave it up for lucrative new opportunities, i.e., I couldn't afford my rent anymore. I learned a lot from that experience, but more than anything, I learned what it was like to be held directly responsible for the product that I designed. When you work for larger companies, it's easy for the design process to become abstracted, to turn out widgets instead of deeply personal objects. When you ask your friends and family to support your small product line, you hear about every button falling off, every poor fit decision, and every poor trim choice. But you also hear about how many people ask them where they got it, how well it works for them, how they can't find anything else like it, and they want another one, how attached they've become. how much they think of you when they wear it. We inserted ourselves into their lives with these sweaters, these coats. Some shirts became friends. Some jackets made the shift from simply useful to really meaningful. When I started to really look at the products that people kept and used for a long time, they seemed to run the gamut in terms of quality, aesthetic, and type. Inherently subjective, someone's longtime favorite could be a heavy-duty American-made leather jacket, just as much as a coat from a fast fashion brand. The goal is not to try to determine from the outside what has inherent meaning, but to practice a method. To design product with the intention of it being long-lasting, to create meaning and the desire for it to be loved. This ongoing reflection has led me to identify 4 elements that I believe these types of objects have. This is a work in progress, so I welcome lively debate on the subject. But this is what I've landed on after reflecting on the thousands of products, some wonderful and some terrible, that I've been responsible for contributing to the world. The 4 elements are quality, function, beauty, and history. Quality. Quality is the first requirement that goes into making long-lasting product. The nature of each garment itself will dictate to a certain extent how long it can last. Not all things are created equal. A 30 single t-shirt is not going to last as long as a heavy-duty canvas, triple-stitched pair of pants. I'm not proposing that we all try to design product that literally lasts 30, 40, 100 years, because we aren't all going to wear Kevlar jumpsuits for the rest of our lives. We're gonna wear t-shirts, we're gonna wear lace, we're gonna wear fine silk. Things that are not the most durable materials available. Within each material's particular context, however, we can make choices to maximize quality. Using fabrics made with long, staple fibers, choosing a seam finish that won't unravel or tear, items that can be washed without exorbitant pilling, without too much shrinkage, how well a button is sewn on, a reinforced pocket. Quality, in my experience, is the first step towards loyalty. It builds trust when you wear and use a product that's made well. Each of us, within whatever limitations or price points we work, has the ability to demand and improve quality. Just because a product is mass market doesn't mean it's low quality or vice versa. Economy of scale can radically affect the price-value relationship of an object, so that a less expensive one might actually be higher quality than a more expensive one. Attention to and expectation of quality is what we as designers are able to do. It's what makes the difference, and it begins with us. Function. Function is the most fundamental requirement in design. Some would say it's the most basic dividing line between design and art. It's essential to designing product that stands the test of time. But to me, the definition is very broad. To function is to serve a purpose. The purpose should be clear and the intention should be realized in the product. I don't really care if the purpose is to keep you dry and warm, make you look attractive, give you comfort, allow you to move effortlessly, or simply to be outrageous. The question is how well the product achieves its intended function. So, what would it mean to design product where the intended function above all else is to last as long as possible by being of high quality and valued by its owner? Whatever bucket you have to fill for merchandising or sales, whatever slot you're designing into, whatever end use it's for, what would happen if we, as designers, intend for it to function at a deeper level? Beauty. Sorry about this, it's supposed to just be one at a time, but you guys get the picture. What is beautiful is a question that has been discussed and debated since language has been recorded. I'm not going to enter into that debate today. All I can say here is that beauty is vitally necessary, and I believe that we all know it when we see it. I believe that creative people intuitively are drawn to beauty and satisfied by it. I believe that we all have a magical part of ourselves that when it sees beauty says, yes, that's it. I believe that every time we design a sleeve, a stole, a stitch, or a leg, a color combination, that we should be creating beauty. I also know that it's not easy, and I probably fail more than I succeed. I was working at a large corporate company, and one day they distributed an article about how talent didn't exist, how creativity could be taught like math or science. I almost laughed out loud, and incidentally left the job not too long after. I don't believe that creativity is taught. I believe it's directed, that it's honed, that it's developed, but that ultimately it's born of something internal that cannot be quantified or synthesized. The development of talent depends on cultivating this intuition. What that means in the simplest terms is to trust your feeling about what will look great and what won't. You have nothing to lose, and you don't need to defend your intuition. This is part of your job as a designer, to bring to the table an undefinable sense of aesthetic rightness. The more seriously you take that job and that ability, the more likely you will be to develop and cultivate your intuition, which leads to more beautiful product. History. I'm using the word history in this context to mean the story of an object that goes into its creation. Once released in the world, a timeless product will earn its own history, but there's a story that goes into the creation of every object by the designer. Each of us can tell that story every day. It's the reason for the object's existence. Be it recreating a World War II military jacket that our grandfather wore, or simply a pattern that was inspired by the tree, or some light, or a vintage bike jersey that you found laying on the ground one day. Whether you intend it or not, every single product any of us creates exists in a historical context. Everything we make will be simultaneously new and yet has already existed in another similar form. You're part of a long tradition of creating product, so cultural and environmental context is always relevant. You can educate yourself or remain ignorant as to the history of what you design, but you will not be able to create product that people use and wear outside of that context. I'm suggesting that you use it as a tool. Become conscious of its manipulations, and make conscious the prehistory of every item that you design. History gives product weight. And though most people can't articulate why, they are attracted to product with history and tend to value it more. We're designing in a time where these histories behind our product are more easily communicated than ever before. Whether it be through marketing or media, it's clear that customers want to know and want to share histories. Making each product's history explicit leads to a deeper connection to that product, making it more meaningful to its owner. Working for Woolrich for the past 8 years has been an opportunity to put all these elements into practice for me. The brand itself is 186 years old, built by creating durable and enduring product. History. It began with men's woolen clothing created for outdoor functional workwear use, and evolved into a complete lifestyle brand rooted in the outdoors. Core to the brand identity are the values that support long-lasting product. We commonly hear about generations of a family wearing our product. My closet full of vintage product is a testament to how long the beauty of Woolrich product lasts. Woolrich is unique in many ways, but I had never worked for a company with such stringent quality assurance practices until I joined them. Sometimes annoyingly so. Woolrich tests its products beyond accepted standards and with narrow allowances. Quality. It's this kind of tradition that breeds customer loyalty to the brand, which in turn results in letters like these. Gentlemen, my husband brought me this Woolrich coat about 25 years ago. It has no lining and it's made from a blanket. You had it in Cabela's, Nordstrom's, and a Western store. To this day, complete strangers stop me and want to know where I got it. Donna Wagner, Dallas, Oklahoma. That's Donna wearing her coat in her hallway. My father received this shirt as his 16th birthday present in 1939. I thought you'd like to see that after 67 years of wear, it's still going strong. My father died in 1994, and the shirt came into my possession. My dad never treated the shirt with any special regard or care. It was simply his shirt, and because it never wore out, there was never any need to replace it. We have slides of him wearing it on his many fishing trips in the 50s and 60s, and he always wore it while raking leaves in the fall. I can't remember a time when he didn't wear this shirt. While it's a cherished possession of mine because it belonged to my pop, I assure you it gets no special treatment from me either. My dad was a physician who had the means to buy any kind of clothing he wanted. Again, there was simply no reason to replace the perfectly fine shirt he already had. I thought you might want to know how good your quality assurance must have been in 1939. My hope is that your new lines have the same longevity. I wouldn't know about that since I too have no need to replace the Woolrich item I already own. Susan Reppert, Fountain Hill, Pennsylvania. My mother was wearing a red, white plaid wool shirt around the house the other day. I mentioned that it seems like I've seen that shirt through my entire life. She said I had. She bought that shirt for my dad, who it doesn't fit anymore, the first year that they were married. And she remembers clearly that she had to save for it because it was very expensive and they had very little money. But look at it, still red, no worn spots, and still keeping them warm. Now, I'm sure you've heard similar stories several times before, but you see, my mother is 91 years old and my dad is 92, and tomorrow is their 67th wedding anniversary. This Woolrich shirt has been a memory of this marriage for all those years. I'm sure there have been other Woolrich shirts that they didn't have to scrimp and save for over the years, but none holds the endurance and beauty of this one. Marilyn Chu. Do you think you will ever bring back this design fabric in a men's shirt? I've worn this shirt for many years and received more favorable comments than I have ever received on any other item of clothing. Keep up the good work. I love your men's clothing. Butch Woodward. Butch cut his shirt and sent it to us so that we could recreate the pattern, which we're going to have in fall 17. Being responsible for all the product design for Woolrich, I take these letters seriously, and I consider myself a keeper of tradition. Our 503 Hunt coat has been made for over 100 years, changing as time goes by, but not as much as you'd expect. Our wool buffalo shirt is another style that's been made for almost a century and worn by every type of person you can imagine. The Arctic parka, created for Alaskan pipeline workers, has been an icon for 40 years. These are some of the items passed from generation to generation and still sold today. If we analyze the proportion, the make, the weight, the function, will we find answers? Is there a type of pocket that makes one design stand the test of time more than another? A color? A fabric? Combinations of these elements that are eternally attractive? Instead of engaging in some kind of scientific apparel analysis, I believe what has been borne out in my experience, that you don't always know when you're creating an icon or a product that is long-lasting, that sometimes magic just happens. Everything right comes together, the flow is unbroken, the right pieces fit and gel. Then time happens, and time mercilessly critiques the work we do, as it should. The best I can do, and I think it's worth doing, is to design each product I make with quality, function, beauty, and history. Time will test the theory. Like many of you, I recently read Marie Kondo's book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. For those of you who may not be familiar, she teaches a method of decluttering through handling every object you own and only keeping those that bring you joy. The book touched on something that I'd been feeling for a long time and had not articulated. Yes, I want to surround myself with objects that bring me joy, but I and you are in the unique position to create objects that bring people joy. And not just joy, but meaning. Objects that are needed, that stay with you in moments of elation, fear, sadness, accomplishment, failure, and with every experience grow more meaningful. We have the capacity to create product that stays in your keep pile. And then something happens. People keep product that's meaningful to them, and product that people keep for a long time becomes more meaningful and adds more meaning to their lives. People use, love, need, and notice these objects. They enhance people's lives. These are the last things people will throw in the garbage. Every product that someone keeps and continues to use is one less item in a landfill. Every stride we make in producing objects that do not deplete our natural resources or pollute our planet is noble and is necessary. However, fundamentally, the best thing that we can ever do to reduce waste is buy less and use products for longer. It's so simple, yet we continue to churn out more and more over better and better. It falls to us as designers to choose organic, work with factories that don't use toxic chemicals in their wet processes, and push for certification of sustainable materials and methods. But none of these efforts compare to the simple practice of buying objects that you can use for a long time and therefore buying fewer of them. I believe that discarding less is a byproduct of creating objects that people are attached to and that holds meaning in their lives. That coat or shirt that stays in the keep pile when you clean out that closet. A sweater that you actually go to the trouble of repairing because you just can't bear to let it go. Denim that has been patched and repatched and with every repair becomes more valuable. People need clothes. Clothes wear out, and even the best of them often need to be replaced. We're not going to design ourselves out of a job by creating product that stands the test of time, though some of the Woolrich customers seem concerned about that. Quality, function, beauty, history. Design product that lasts a long time and people value to create meaning and reduce waste. I know that most of you will go back to your desks, whether you're working on your own line or working in a huge corporate company, and you'll have to design something. You might be tired, you might be excited, you might be disillusioned, you might be inspired. But that moment is always an opportunity. Use that moment. Give yourself a breath, a space, to allow something more meaningful, more beautiful, and more functional to come out of your pencil or your stylus. Try it. Try it and fail, who cares? But try to design something that will stand the test of time. And if you figure something out, if you have an epiphany, and it all becomes clear to you, write me an email and tell me about it, please. Thank you. So I think we have some time for Q&A if anybody has questions or wants to bring up anything related to the talk you just heard. Any brave souls?
I know it's always hard to get started, but yeah, this is a real open environment, so if you have questions, now's the time to, or later as well.
Question. Yeah. So I've heard people describe objects that connect as objects that help you be who you want to be. Does that seem to resonate with your idea, like of things that will connect for whatever reason? So some people love that historical context. Others love the performance aspect, that it speaks to the performance that they want to associate with, and kind of have as they're trying to self-actualize themselves. Does that seem to fit with your experience?
Absolutely. And I think what that really is creating product based on authenticity rather than, again, creating an image for a person to fit into as opposed to representing core values that are important to them. So for instance, if the function of your garment primarily is to do something that it's meant to do, that to feel a way that's attractive, to kind of sit into a historical context that makes sense with the activity, the final purpose, all those things coming together lead to an experience that's actually a reflection on that person's desire and value to utilize that product for whatever purpose they want it for, as opposed to designing something that's purely based on image and based on trend. I think trend itself isn't a dirty word to me. It reflects something that's happening in the world. It's often really, really important to pay a lot of attention to what people are attracted to and why, how that's reflecting the current of cultural change. But again, designing the product with the intent to make somebody look a certain way, as opposed to offering a product to them that's reflecting their values and needs, is a completely different practice. Jessica Hemmer in the back.
What brands do you think really do a good job of exhibiting that, of print like that for the customer, who they are?
Well, that's a loaded question. For those of you who didn't hear, Jessica just asked what brands I thought did a good job of doing that. I think, I don't think it's a brand as much as it is certain items that are designed, and that's what I mean by all of us having successes and failures. Even with Woolrich, every collection we put out, there are pieces in there that I'm not proud of, and there are pieces in there that I really love. And then things surprise me. Some things that I thought were kind of like blah people really love and respond to, and that's the dialogue that gets created between me and my assumptions and the people actually using the product that I really care about. So I don't think it's possible for one brand to somehow own this reality. You know, I think the point is that every single brand has the opportunity to create product, and no brand is going to be 100% successful. But what I'm interested in and what I'm trying to kind of start consciously practicing now is designing product with that intention and seeing what happens. You know, it might take me 20 years to understand more about it, and then hopefully I'll be back up here saying something else.
Do you have any thoughts on the business side of this whole dialogue? Because I'm sure we're all like on board with it.
Right. But what if the boss isn't? Yeah. You know, we were just talking about this last night about, you know, the disconnect between kind of designers' passions and getting everything dumbed down or simplified based on a spreadsheet or a P&L. I think that's a little bit part of the nature of this business and of being in any kind of profit-driven situation. That being said, I think that really comes down to individuals. I've worked with some people who are merchandisers, who are business leaders, who are presidents of companies, that intuitively understand the value of kind of a culture created around product, emotional attachment to product, emotional reaction to product. And I think those leaders are some of the most successful in the business. You know, people talk about somebody like Steve Jobs all the time, but honestly, love it or hate it, even at a brand like Abercrombie and Fitch, you know, Mike Jeffries, who ran that brand for years and made God knows how many billions of dollars, he responded intuitively to product. Mickey Drexler is the same way. And sitting in rooms with those guys, Ralph Lauren's the same way. It's like those are the people with vision almost never discount the importance of this kind of emotional, intuitive, and meaning relationship with product. A lot of people who are even in our industry to begin with, rather than an investment banker or what have you, got involved because they love product, because they're obsessed about it. I think that's probably why most of us started designing. So I think it really comes down to individuals, and I think the most successful people in a more kind of finance-oriented part of our industry will respect this reality and leave us to do our work in it. I think the people who dumb it down, who interfere, are just not as good at their jobs.
It seems like all the materials innovation and stuff that we do, everyone's kind of working towards the same goal, but keeping it close to our chest and trying to be the first to market or whatever. Is there any way to kind of get designers together to kind of pressure either the mills or the industry to accept, hey, you know, now C6 DWR is like the new norm or whatever, but now everyone's trying to improve on that. And how can we kind of level the playing field for all companies to have access to the best products rather than being so worried about MOQ and doing all your research and having 20 different chemical companies out there telling their stuff's the best? Is there any way to create like a partnership amongst designers to have some sourcing library or some kind of, you know, I don't know, sustainable, product list that you can actually go to and have negotiated pricing that's reasonable and you're not pushing the financial limits all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think part of the spirit of this conference is us being able to communicate with each other and work together despite, you know, I don't go to work and sign an NDA. I don't know if people who work at Nike do. I can't speak to that. but the one thing that it seems so obvious to me about apparel and fashion, or whatever you want to call it, is that things change every 5 minutes, and there are always 10 people doing the same thing at the same time and just calling it something different. So whether you're successful or not, I don't think has to do with necessarily whether you're first to market. I think it's how well you do it. So again, it's one of those things that anybody who really understands what's going on, I don't think would be overly protective. I mean, I have a strong point of view about this. Other people obviously would disagree, but there's no point. So you're going to save a season? You know, it's going to go to market. People are going to buy it. People are going to rip it off. Like, that's why fight it? You know, I think that essentially what would happen is if we had a more collaborative environment, if we communicated more openly, which I am more than happy to do. I don't think there's one thing in my collection that I wouldn't be happy to talk about. I don't have any secrets. That we would just we would just end up better editing the product and the materials that we use. And what I mean by that is sometimes with new technology, you know, we're interested in something, but it sounds a little crazy or it sounds like bullshit, frankly, excuse me. And you don't really know. It takes some time to vet it out. And that's one of the core things that, to me, would be a really amazing byproduct of more communication between all of us. That we not only talk to each other about what really works in which condition, but what we think is actually meaningful in terms of including it or making a story about it. And then fighting for that when it goes through the whole kind of filter of merchandising, sales, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's possible. I think, again, I've never met one leader in this industry who's extremely protective of their information where that's what built their business or that's what made them successful. You know, I think it's a fear-based way of working that actually doesn't lead to protecting profits at all. So again, I don't know if there's some people who would argue with me about that, but it seems pretty self-evident. In the meantime, I think we should all just talk to each other. You know, it doesn't need to be that official. It's like, I think that's one of the beautiful things, especially about this environment in the outdoor industry, is that people are really, you know, whether they're able to be or not, the intention and the values are really collaborative. And I think if we need to be a little bit more courageous about acting that way on a daily basis with each other and supporting each other, I think that we should do it and be kind of the people that lead the way.
Just to comment on that topic, there are kind of three pretty big groups that work on that exact factor. Outdoor industry, OIA, Sustainable Working Group. There are really a lot of people in the business are getting together or outdoor retailer on a regular basis discussing what's happening in sustainability and technology. SAC, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, is also working on it. Textile Exchange has really worked to set up a lot of criteria about fabric materials. So there are some pretty good working groups that are cross-industry from mainstream apparel to outdoor to fashion, who are all looking at the key sustainability issues, communicating with each other, trying to set better industry standards so you don't have 20 different brands asking for a lot of different things and maybe not knowing all of the implications. So it's really involving chemistry, fiber, the industry, setting up standards like the Higg Index, which is a way to evaluate an overall product sustainability. So there's a lot of good tools, and it's a pretty good open dialogue where people kind of put their brand or their job behind them and are sharing information and best practices and trying to generate really good industry-wide standards. And so that would be the area I would look forward to kind of get involved with those areas.
That's wonderful, absolutely. I think you bring up a really important point too, that the success of all the organizations that are trying to really vet technology and disseminate more information and research more product, they all need all of us to contribute and participate in that dialogue and use those services in order to make them better and create more opportunity for us to actually learn and use what they're offering. So I think that the success of all of these really great organizations that have started also is relative to how much time we put into, you know, working with them. I think, go ahead.
It's a great speech, so thank you.
Thank you.
Question for you, in a brand like yours, which has such a deep and rich history, when you have these products that have been around for 100 years, and you get letters from people that have had products for 70 years and want the same thing, how do you balance the desire for the innate ability to create newness while having these sacred products that you frankly can't touch?
Yeah, that's the question I ask myself on a daily basis. You hit the nail on the head. I think it's not as hard as I thought it was 3 years ago. When I was working in Italy, I was designing an American heritage brand in Italy, and it was kind of easier in a way because people were more open to interpreting it in different ways that had already been kind of reinterpreted, reimagined. when I came back to the US and started kind of looking at revamping some of the product in our core American assortment, which frankly, wasn't really up to standard in terms of relating to contemporary style, I had to figure out how to deal with that. And a lot of different things happened. One, there's certain items that I was like completely disgusted by at first, and then they grew on me, and then I became like obsessed with them. Like, if any of you are interested, go on our website and look at it. But there's this sweater vest. It's called the grazing sheep sweater. And there are a few people in the audience who are familiar with it. And it's a sweater vest for women that has like a couple little sheep on the bottom. And I was like, what is this? It's so weird. That sweater is like a phenomenon. That sweater vest sells literally, with thousands and thousands of units every year. The same thing. We recolor it. It's amazing. And so I sent my mom a link to order some stuff for her birthday, and she ordered that. She talks about it all the time. She left it at my house accidentally, and I had to mail it to her. So what I'm saying is that I also started to frankly, build some respect for items that maybe I reacted to off the cuff, but when I realized how meaningful they actually were and how they really did stand the test of time, it changed my understanding. It informed my aesthetic. I don't think I could design that again, but I'm learning something from it. In addition, I also figured out that a lot of our core product that people really love doesn't need to be changed. I kind of looked at some details, like was the stitching quality up to par? Were the buttons right? Those things people didn't notice as much. It's I think a little bit subconscious when you make those changes and people react to it, or it feels like it's better quality or it lasts a little bit longer. So I felt free to kind of upgrade. But what I realized is that for a lot of the product, I didn't need to redesign it per se. Like, it was a great flannel shirt, for instance. But part of my job in coming in and starting to kind of reposition Woolrich was to show a lot of different people wearing it and to actually get some visuals on how it was being used in people's daily lives. And that's when I realized, we would like send it to some guy who was doing a trip in Bolivia, and he would photograph it on Instagram. And then it would be like a really conservative guy wearing it to church who wrote us a letter because he was pissed that the button fell off. Or, all of a sudden it started to become clear how many different types of people were wearing this product, how universal it truly was, and that I didn't have to change any of it. I just had to show how to wear it a little differently and start to kind of dovetail in a different variety of product to make it feel more relevant and current. So it ended up being a practice of really protecting things that meant a lot to other people and that other people really liked, even if I didn't get that at first, and building around that with things that I felt complemented or shifted the balance of what those garments meant as a total look. And you watch really old brands trying to reinvent themselves, and it's really hard, and everybody tries to do it. And what we talk about internally at Woolrich is that this is a long process. I'm not gonna do it overnight with a flashy campaign and a totally new set of product. It's gonna be an evolution, and it's gonna be a combination of continuing to upgrade and improve what we have that we already love, and slowly building in product that we feel like has the same values, the same relevance, the same potential long-lasting quality for people of the current generation, for people who are gonna potentially wear it for another 30 years. And that's a really hard gold standard to meet, but it also is like kind of what keeps me interested every day. Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about your team and how you create a culture that believes and also practices these values?
That's actually really easy. Number one, because the people who are attracted to the brand, generally there's already something there. I'll be honest, it's not the highest paying company. It's not the highest paying job. We don't have amazing benefits. We don't fly business class, which sucks. And I've worked for companies that had more money. But when you walk into the mill in Pennsylvania and you breathe the lanolin, not to be cheesy, but it's so emotional. And it reminds me of my mother's sweater. You know, she's from New Zealand, and I grew up wearing these like raw wool sweaters, and you know, she wouldn't turn the thermostat up. That was not how we handled the cold. So it was just, you know, it just connected with me on a really deep level, and you become a little bit addicted to it from a brand perspective. And the people that I've hired onto my team are people who I could recognize felt the same way and were emotionally involved and connected and did care. Part and parcel with that came respecting a certain type of customer, not having to have everything be flashy and new and like the coolest kid on the block, but also having an amazing taste level. So there are certain kind of combinations, like every single person on my team has, I think, a really elevated taste level, but really understands product and really respects everyday people. And that's not that easy to find, but those are the people that when they come together to do the right thing, make the right choices, and frankly, are a nice group of people to work with. Some of them are in the audience, so don't cry, guys. All right, well, thanks so much, everybody.